record. All right. Okay, so yeah, so what's happening in the world today definitely needs everybody's attention. I believe that a lot of good is going to come out of this, even though it's always something that's terrible situation that happens to kind of unite us and, raise our voice, right? So even though it's kind of like, every time something happens, that's when we become united. I mean, that's my feeling on things. It's like once we identify a common issue, a common enemy, something, then we band together, and then that's when our voices are heard. That's when our presence is felt. But it's a great opportunity while we're in that situation to come up with solutions. So I decided, I reached out to my dad and my sister. Oh, there he is. I talked him up. All right, so I reached out but actually my father reached out to me, right? I'll give you kind of like the whole backstory of how this thing happened. My father called me and said, he was very upset about all the things that's been happening, especially with the George Floyd situation. And he was just letting me know that, something has got to change, right? And my father has a very interesting background that we'll get into a little bit later. But also, I felt the same way. I was like, man, these things, it keeps happening. What can we do? It always starts with that question, like, what can we do? Or I'll even personalize it even more. What can I do? Right? So I asked him, I was like, well, he said that he wanted to make a statement. I was like, oh, wow, my dad wants to make a statement, right? So, okay, that's cool. And so I invited him to do a webinar, and he was with it. And he was like, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. Let's do it. So, so we, set up something, and I was like, wait a minute. My sister is a revolutionary in her own right, right? And I know that she has been working on a lot of great things also. So why don't we get her involved with it as well? And that's kind of like how we came up with this family meeting, and we just kind of want to open it up to everyone, because I believe all of us are family as well, right? So, and I'm sure that there's a lot of different viewpoints that will help shape all of our, visions of what's happening in this world. So, so without further ado, I want to go ahead and do our introduction of our, well, I guess it's kind of like panelists. So first I will introduce, oh, me. I forgot I put myself on here. Well, a lot of you on here kind of like already, you guys are my tribe. We've been on this Zoom thing for a while now. So, but for those who may be on here that don't know me, my name is Frantz Derenoncourt Jr. I mean, I classify myself as, an entrepreneur, right? That's pretty much somebody that, does a whole bunch of different things, that doesn't want to list, all the things that they do, right? So I have a long list of things. I just put a couple of things on here that I do. I'm an author, wrote 4 books. I wrote 3 books, right? I'm also a publisher, published 4 books, right? Also, I've been in the real estate industry for the past 20 years in the DC metro area. And that's pretty much what I do. Lately, I've been doing, after this whole quarantine thing, everyone's been home, I've been hosting webinars every week with Professor Baina Bello. I also do my own kind of webinars every time there's something that I would like to address similar to this. And, I do a lot of different things throughout to help keep me busy, right? And also we have today Ellora Derenoncourt. Let me see if I could move this thing so I could see everything. And I actually have some things to say about Ellora. So Ellora Derenoncourt, my sister, I called you my kid sister before you logged on, by the way. Ellora Derenoncourt grew up in Southern California and received her bachelor's degree at Harvard University in 2009. Before beginning her graduate studies in economics, she worked as a paralegal in a civil rights firm focused on police brutality in New York City, and later participated in community organizing in Oakland, California. She returned to Harvard for her doctoral studies in economics, graduating with her PhD in 2019. She'll be starting as an assistant professor of economics and public policy at UC Berkeley in July 2020. Her work focuses on the long-run evolution of racial inequality in the US with projects on the Great Migration, the minimum wage and the Black-white earnings gap, and the racial wealth gap. So welcome, Ellora. How you doing, sis?
Good, I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. What I'm gonna do, since Dad is on here, I'm gonna do his introduction first,
Okay.
and then we'll come right back to you so you can get started. Is that cool?
Yep.
All right, fantastic. All right, and now we have Frantz Derenoncourt, MD. This picture, you know, he's somewhere in the world.
How come I can't see you guys?
Oh, there you are.
There we go.
Hey, there you are. All right, so Frantz Derenoncourt, I'll just read off some of your credentials over here, Pops. CDR, U.S. Navy, retired in the U.S. Navy. Right? Undergraduate, Columbia College, 1971. To medical school, Columbia College of Physician and Surgeon, 1977. Or is that surgery? I'm not sure. And had his private practice, cardiothoracic. Man, this is some big words you got over here, Pop.
Cardiothoracic surgery.
Yes, and vascular surgery in San Diego, California from 1984 to 2010. So how you doing, Dad?
I'm good.
Awesome. All right, great. So we're gonna come back to you. So I want to first oh wait, okay, I just let somebody in. They wouldn't mute it. All right, so what I'm gonna do, everybody, I'm going to introduce, come back to my sister. We're gonna come back to my dad a little bit later. But first I want to go to my sister, Ellora Derenoncourt. So let me get rid of this share. And let me spotlight my sis. All right. So Ellora, so you've been working on some great projects like lately. I mean, not even lately, for a long time. I remember when I visited you at Harvard some years ago. I think when I first came out with my first book. And I remember the experience was so dope. Like I came up to present my book. You set everything up for me. I believe it was at Tickner Hall somewhere. And I was able to present my book to a bunch of Harvard University students and professors. And after the presentation—
They loved it.
Yes, thank you. I was surprised at the turnout. I was like, wow. So, and after the presentation, there was actually, the students were occupying one of the buildings, one of the halls. So we walked over to, I forget the name of the hall. The only name I remember from that was Belinda Hall, right? So there was a lot of stuff happening. I believe Harvard University had, money that they used from a slaveholder and his name was on the building, and the students found out about it, and they occupied it until they renamed the building. right? And so that was like my first experience at Harvard. And I was like, wow, this is awesome. And I met a lot of cool people. So it's a pleasure to have you here, Laura.
Thanks so much. So thanks everyone for being here. I thought I would share some of my perspectives and insights through my scholarship. As Frantz mentioned, I am an economist and I focus on racial inequality in the US and how it's evolved in the 20th century. So I'm going to talk about a couple of projects. First is the Great Migration. And can everyone see my screen all right? Just get a little wave.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Yes.
Yeah. So this project, and the reason I focus on these projects is because I want to share my own understanding and get your thoughts and perspectives on how we got to the moment that we're at in the world right now with everything that's happening in the US and around the murder of George Floyd and our kind of collective expression of grief, rage, and demanding change. So the Great Migration, I like to start there because it is what I would call the largest experiment in moving to opportunity in US history. It was a moment in the 20th century where millions of Black people moved out of the South and they went to cities like Chicago, New York, and St. Louis because they had had enough of Jim Crow, of restrictions on their voting rights, on where and who they could be in public with, on not being able to send their kids to public schools. And they moved north. And they moved in the millions, so much so that, at the start of the 20th century, 90% of the Black population in the US was in 14 states in the South. And by 1970, only half remained in the South. And this was an important moment because Black people moved en masse out of farming and really low-paying jobs into better-paying jobs in factories in the North. And you could basically double your earnings if you undertook this journey. What this migration did was change the demographics of the cities that people were migrating to. Places like Chicago, New York, Detroit, there were Black people living there before, but this was a moment where so many people moved in that neighborhoods were changing. And let's just say that the residents who were there at the time definitely noticed this and they definitely objected. So this is an image from a riot that occurred by white people in the city of Detroit in 1942 because the federal government was proposing a housing project that would be integrated, that would have Black and white residents. This is in Detroit, Michigan, not Alabama. And they protested, and this sign, I show it because it really captures this idea that their view was access to our community and any benefits associated with our community is conditional on white identity. And so this is the context in which millions of Black people are moving to these cities. And what I find when I look at these places today is that despite historically having been the quote unquote promised land for Black people, the North, if you look at places like Detroit or Chicago today, they are some of the worst places to grow up Black in America. And the group that's hit hardest by this backlash that occurred over the 20th century, in which I'll describe in more detail, the group that was hit hardest was Black men. So if you look at Black boys growing up in Detroit, which was one of the most important destinations during the Great Migration, and you compare them to Black boys growing up, for example, in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which was a less important destination, still had people coming in, but much less so than Detroit. Those boys who are growing up in Detroit, even if they are coming from families with the same income as those growing up in Pittsburgh, when they get to adulthood, they're going to have less money, lower income. And that's because of all the changes that took place in places like Detroit in response to Black people moving there. So in my project, I collected data on as many characteristics of these locations as I could over the whole 20th century. I wanted to understand, how did these places change? How did the ladder of opportunity get taken away for Black families? And there are three key things that happened. One, when Black people moved in large numbers, white people moved out of central cities and into suburbs in a phenomenon known as white flight. They also pulled their kids at higher rates out of public schools and into private schools, creating this division of Black families concentrated in the public system and white families increasingly moving to suburbs or into private schools. The second set of changes was that economic opportunity became sparser in these places, and the quality of those cities as places to live really sharply declined, starting in the 1960s. Central city areas became unsafe. And finally, the third thing that I document is that the way local governments and policymakers responded to these changes was to invest in a carceral state, not to invest in other forms of public services like education or health or sanitation. They spent more money on police and they started incarcerating more people. So we're left with, and just to kind of show you these patterns over time, places like Detroit or Baltimore or Chicago, they didn't look that different historically in terms of how they spent money, especially on police and things like that, before this big wave of Black migration into those cities. And then over this period from 1940 to 1970, which was the peak of the Great Migration, they start increasing spending on police. And as you can see, that pattern persists for decades afterwards, so that I would say we're still living in the shadow of how these cities changed when Black people moved in. And that's the context that we're in today, when you have the incident that happened in Minneapolis and the incidents that are happening all across cities all over the country. So this is just a point that I already made, but you might expect to invest in education when you have people moving out of a place where they were denied exactly that. Black families couldn't send their kids to public schools in the South in 1940. You might think, let's give them that education, but that is not a change that we see in response to Black migration to these places. So, that's kind of the story that I want to bring up in the context of what has happened after George Floyd's murder. I want to briefly talk about another body of work that I think is potentially more hopeful, but will also get us thinking about the kinds of changes we can be demanding that we have a right to in America. So this second project studies minimum wage policy in the US. And the underlying fact, how I got motivated in studying this is a very important one, which is that the racial gap in earnings between Black and white workers has been the same for around 50 years. It hasn't improved. If you go back to 1950, it only improved in one period, a 10-year period in the late 60s and early 70s. One of the important things that happened at that time was that the federal minimum wage, which used to only cover certain industries, it was finally expanded to cover a new set of industries. Now, why is this important to Black people? It turns out that when the minimum wage was introduced in the US in the 30s, there was a big fight between Southern politicians and the federal government about who was going to be covered. They wanted to have a separate set of policies for Black people, basically lower coverage, lower standards. But that was just not, even at the time, they couldn't really politically just directly say that. So they basically took a look at the industries that Black people tended to work in. And they said, we're not going to cover these industries. Only under those conditions can you pass a minimum wage. So the minimum wage was passed, and industries where Black people were overrepresented, like agriculture, retail, services, they were all left out until the late 1960s. When those industries were finally covered by the minimum wage, it had a huge effect on earnings for Black workers. It improved the earnings of white workers too, because they also worked in these industries. But Black workers' wages went up by twice as much as white workers' wages in response to expanding the minimum wage to these industries. So our research actually showed that this was a missing piece of the puzzle of that one period that we saw racial progress in the earnings gap. People have looked at school desegregation, they looked at the Civil Rights Act, and those played a role too. But as important was getting this basic coverage under labor market standards. I want to end by saying that this didn't come out of thin air. This was part of a movement that demanded economic equality as part of racial equality. So one of the demands of the March on Washington from 1963, demand number 9, which I've circled here, was a broadened Fair Labor Standards Act, which is the act through which we have the minimum wage, to include all areas of employment which are presently excluded. So I wanted to leave on this note to say these are the kinds of policies that we have a right to, and that will that are necessary for changing the position that Black people are in economically in this country when we come across something like the COVID-19 pandemic. People who are forced in low-paying jobs don't have the kinds of savings that they need to weather this storm, nor do they have the kinds of rights and protections that they need to take the time away from work if they get sick. And Black people, again, still are overrepresented in those jobs. So I'm going to conclude there, and I would hope to get your questions, because there's a lot more to discuss, and I'd love to hear how we can learn from this history and apply it to our current moment in our demands for change. Thanks.
Awesome. Man, that is some crazy information, right? But it's not surprising, but to just see it in black and white, like this is what happened. So pretty much you're saying that during the Great Migration, when millions of Blacks came looking for opportunities in the North, that after the white flight, pretty much instead of investing in schools, hospitals, different opportunities for these large incoming workforce, what they did was pretty much invest in policing, prisons, and stuff like that.
Yep.
Wow. All right. Well, if anyone has any questions, you could go ahead and raise your hand if you have questions for Ellora. So I'm going to just hold off on taking questions directly for Ellora at the moment, and then I'm going to move on to my pops, Frantz Derenoncourt, MD, joining us live from Southern California. So how you doing, Dad?
I'm good, son. I'm good. Very nice program. I see you guys are really doing a wonderful job. Excellent so far. Very good.
Yes. So I was just mentioning to the people before you came on that you called me last week, and you were very emotional and distraught about everything that was going on, especially in the case of George Floyd and the police brutality that he experienced, which ended up with him losing his life, pretty much murdered.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
For millions of people to see.
it, it was a touching experience.
Absolutely.
I have had this long career and everything, and in medicine, we have been trained and we work so hard to save people's lives, and to us, death is the well. I don't want to get too graphic, but as a surgeon that I am, death is the enemy. Death is the enemy. We are focused on saving life, and in my career, I've operated on 15,000 people, and every time I touch someone, the, it is on. I want to make sure that their life is preserved. For me, after 30 years of that, to sit there and watch this person extinguish a life that I've fought so hard every day of my life to try to preserve, and put his head in his pocket and his head up in a cockish way to obliterate that life, I felt so motivated, so moved that was and essentially an abrogation of the contract that we have with that type of institution. We cannot have an institution that that codifies the elimination of Black life just because you don't want to, deal with how to accept the fact that people don't have to. Uh, this might cause a mute button issue. To kiss butt to be able to save their life. If a guy comes to me, even if I'm doing something a little bit wrong, why does the fact that okay, well, I'm trying to hustle and I want to sell a cigarette here, or I'm going to do something. That's not a life extinguishing event. Why do we have police going out to extinguish somebody's life because they sold a cigarette? Because they cross the street, because they're driving DWB while Black, which has occurred to me many times. But this is crazy. They've abrogated the contract. To me, I've been listening to this argument. That's the most critical issue. It's unfortunate it's happening in the COVID-19 situation, but you know what? It's a critical issue because you can't have institutionalization of obliteration of Black life. It Black life matters. There's no question. All life matters, but Black life certainly matters. And it's just a boring. I was appalled by the whole thing. I spent my whole life saving lives. I mean, every time as a cardiac surgeon, I would try to work on somebody's heart, and they were really, really sick, and it was a fight. It was a fight to save their life, and we lose them. It would take me 3 weeks to recover from that, from the fight to struggle that I lost, the ability to help that person. For some white person to sit here with his knee on somebody's neck obliterating a life is not acceptable. Not acceptable. So that was an obligation in the country. I think the police, the way we know it, doesn't work for us. For the Black community, they need to be disbanded. It doesn't mean that we don't believe in policing. Yes, there has to be some law and order, whatever, but it has to work for us. The white families, they have this idealistic idea about policing. This Barney and Gomer and all of that. And these old white movies and stuff like, Barney comes along and just kicking the tires. He's gonna help you, whatever. That's not the Black experience. So the people, white, and I'm not a racist person at all. Whites have this idealistic idea of policing. For us, it's a completely different experience, irrespective of your status in society or whatever. Things can happen to you, whether you're a professor this, doctor that, or whatever, or every day we cannot allow that to happen. So anyway, that was my thing. I was really upset. That's what I was sharing with Moose, and I think that after trying to save 15,000 lives and fighting like hell to save every life, I cannot tolerate having somebody obliterate somebody's life like that, and that was my motivation. I'll
Absolutely.
tap
Yeah,
in.
I remember. I remember the days because I lived in California, and for those who are wondering who's Moose, that's me. That's my that's my family nickname. So everyone that's in here, you're in on it, right? But now I remember when I was living in California with you for those number of years, and the unfortunate time when a patient did pass. I remember how it affected you when you came home, and it was a different dad. Like it took some time for you to get back to the, to recover from that. And I know you also mentioned a few times with your run-ins with the police after DWB, right, driving while black.
Yes.
So and the defunding of the police, I've seen that a lot of places. I'm not exactly sure if everyone
Well,
has the same idea of what that looks like. I mean, what does that look like to you?
well, I think people right now, when I heard this morning Vice President or Democratic uh, put presidential nominee or presumptive nominee Biden say he's against defunding the police. The issue is we're not saying that there should be no police, but the way we have it now, it's a contract between the citizen and the state. We want safety. We want this. We give you you take you can use our tax money for this and that. You cannot use your tax money to send somebody to kill me because I'm trying to sell a cigarette. This is not a police function. So defunding the police doesn't mean that we hate the police. It means we hate the fact that they can come and kill us for something, whatever. The militarization of the police have turned them into a killing machine. So if the funding of the police and the status of militarized police needs to remain, it just can't. I mean, we can't allow that because, there are lots of functions. If somebody has a mental illness, somebody has some family dispute, and this and that, there are multiple issues. 911 shouldn't be calling the police with tanks and machine guns and helicopters to a family dispute. I mean, that's not the purpose of policing. So police as we know it, we're going to have to get the thinking people of our generation, other generation, young generation, a transgenerational idea generation to figure out what kind of policing we need for our community. Our community is in different areas have different needs. This should be localized and it should be community specific. And we should not be sending armed troops, to a kid that's playing in the park. And then 2 seconds later, dead because nobody knew that. But kids, they're gonna play with stuff. There cannot be that kind of situation.
Absolutely.
Anyway.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, we didn't talk about the Columbia experience, but
yeah, we'll definitely get to that.
But anyway, I'll let you. I was gonna say one thing.
Okay, go ahead.
About if I may, about the whole Columbia days. And in the 1970s, that was forever ago. There were lots of problems. People were being killed, not just black people, but a lot of black people were being killed because we were having this vicious war in Vietnam, and the armed forces had been an avenue in which a lot of young black men went to try to make a living. Of course, the military has a high percentage of minorities, and we were getting killed as well as everybody else in the Vietnam War. So the demonstrations started around the country like they are today against the murder of George Floyd, against the murdering of all sorts of citizens. And it was multiracial. It was just an amazing demonstration of why this country is fabulous. The fact that we can all get together and say, this is not acceptable. This is not who we are. We have to change this. And this is what I see today. And that's the most hopeful thing that I see. And we're going to get through this because everyone is disgusted by it. Everyone wants change. We just have to put our heads together, get people like Ellora, bring down the hammer with the info. They can't deny it. You know, when we have the 411, all right? And so I'm so proud of her. Yes. And Moose. And I think this is, but I have to tell everybody, look, Moose, the reason they call Moose is because he was the biggest kid in the nursery, and I loved it to death. Anyway, so that's the Moose mystery. So anyway, that's all I have to say. If anybody have any other issues, I can always.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, so I want to go back to Ellora very quickly. Yeah, so the like what when you started doing your research for your study and like during the Great Migration of Blacks to the North and all of the increase in funds for the police and stuff like that, what was the one thing that really struck you as like, wow, that was this is really alarming, and that you can see that it has heavy ramifications for what's happening in our society today?
I would say, just to give a bit of background on my field in economics, we typically don't look at some of these topics. And working on racial inequality, not many people do that. And practically no one is looking at the institution of police and our criminal justice system as, perpetuating and exacerbating inequality. They're more likely to narrowly focus on the economics of crime and what kinds of small adjustments can you make to the criminal justice system that'll reduce crime more, and that's the narrow focus. So I had to kind of fight almost against my own training in, at Harvard, predominantly white elite institution, to bring the numbers on this. And I remember being told by faculty and advisors, why are you looking at that? Why are you looking at police spending? That, what does that really even mean to us? What does that tell us? But, and they were pushing, looking at, other public services and especially education, schools, because there's this narrative that you get the education, you can get out of poverty, you can, achieve the American dream. But that was not the lever that was moving here. I didn't see systematic disinvestment from education. I just saw no change. There was one thing that was changing, and that was spending on police. The other thing that struck me was that when I look at, what kids are most affected, it's Black boys. And what public good or public service is specifically affecting that group? And that those two pieces, they line up really well, because Black men are disproportionately affected by police and the criminal justice system. So in these Great Migration cities today, they send more Black men to federal and state prison than places that had less of this migration and less of the change in their institutions as a result. I just wanted to briefly say, coming back to this defunding and what the Democratic nominee is saying about whoa, slow it down. I think that it's our job as Black people to be the moral leadership and the visionaries here. And I think we are at a moment historically where we're the people saying, abolish slavery. And the other people are saying, what are they going to do if we get rid of slavery? They don't have any skills. They don't have any savings. They don't have the right culture. They're not civilized. Whoa. We can't just, but this is a moral issue. And I think the way Dad put it was, accurate. The contract has been broken. The contract, the premise of this institution to control and to keep law and order, that contract has been broken. Maybe it was never right from the beginning, but we're at a moment where I think people are recognizing it's broken. So we're starting from scratch. We're thinking about public safety. I would say we're not even using the word police anymore. I think that is done.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree 100% that the contract has been broken. And I don't think the contract, we got the short end of the stick in the contract of that contract from the very beginning. It was never a win-win situation, right? For Black people and the police. I mean, I believe historically, I mean, that's what the police were really built upon, like from slavery, like the foundation of the police is a slave catcher organization, right? So,
But
so when you go from one thing, I mean, you can't, if your foundation is based in racial profiling and racial inequality and racial stereotypes and stuff like that, then it's hard to reform something like that. You almost have to kind of like blow it up and start all over for the society that we live in today. Because I mean, it's like, how do you? It's like if you plant an apple tree and you're trying to get oranges out of it. You know what I mean? It's just not going to work. So, so going back to you, Pops.
yeah,
I know, you know, I wasn't there, but I've heard a lot of stories about your activities in at Columbia University in the '70s. But I mean, this is not the first. Even though the protest that's going on right now, and you know the riots and stuff that's happening all around the world, really right now. This is not the first time we've had protests. This is not the first time we've
no.
had riots. So, I mean, do you see similarities? Do you see, like, was there, when there were the protests that you were a part of in your younger generation,
Yes.
are there any similarities? What are the differences? Was there
There,
that type of hope that a lot of us feel right now, like, wow, something is really going to change out of this? Or was
well,
it,
I think that you know, going through the whole thing, it was a little bit overwhelming initially, but one thing we knew is we had to do something. We weren't always sure what the best thing was, but going out there and everyone coming out saying this isn't right, it was as if we were all. There's a moment, and we usually call it a prise de conscience. You know, when the entire community just come together, we take a deep breath. It's as if we're all breathing the same lung. All of a sudden, air rushes in. All of us say, "This is not right. This is a prise de conscience." It's like we all know that this is right, and this is exactly what was happening. Everyone got together and say, "It's not right for us, our kids to die, and for us to send bombs and things over there and kill all these other people's kids too. It's not right. We need to stop." And when everybody got together, and the day when they actually, this is interesting, when the police were just as aggressive as this, and I can tell you how many times the police almost got me, but when they killed those 4 white kids at Kent State during those demonstrations, the 4 white kids, when they did that,
what
the
year was,
entire country lit up.
do you
You
remember
know,
what,
the entire country lit up. I mean, I think obviously it. Now, don't you hold me to this exact date here. But Kent State and Vietnam, the whole fight during that time was 68, 69, 70, 69, 70. During that time, when they killed those kids, the whole country got together. It's as if when George Floyd took his last breath, the entire country, white, black, yellow, green, said, this is not right. And this is exactly what happened during that time. Everyone was already upset, and then this was overboard. So, and the fact that you had white kids, Hispanic kids, Asian kids, black kids, everyone walking together, and people of all generations, ages, we knew it was going to be positive. This is the same thing I see today. And I think that without any question, there's a lot to be hopeful for. We just have to keep our foot to the pedal. And we need some visionaries to come and say, this contract isn't working. I mean, yes, you can tweak it and this and that. And just one more anecdote. When one of my sons, I love all my sons like crazy, was trying to join the police force, you know, they gave him a hard time. The reason they gave him a hard time, and I hope he doesn't get mad at me for sharing this, but as a dad, I'm pulling rank. They would not let him join the force unless he was willing to shoot to kill. His position was, can I just maybe slow him down? I mean, is there a way of what? I mean, if you're going to pull the gun and you don't agree to shoot to kill, you can't be a police officer. You know what? Hey, this isn't a war. We're not in a war. You know, we want the Bonnie Feifel character and whatever in that stupid, excuse me, in that little white TV show that showed the police loving everybody. That's what we want. Okay, that's what we want. Okay, we don't want the police militarized to the teeth. Can you imagine Bonnie White Feifel on a tank coming down like whatever little street they had there in Hunky Tonk, whatever little white town? That it's not gonna work. We cannot have the police militarized to the teeth in our community. We need a new contract, a completely new contract. Yes, you know, this community may need to organize how people get to do the project and this and that. It's different than Joe in the suburb figuring out who's going to pick up his garbage at whatever. Issues need to be localized, centralized, etc. We need to not accept a band-aid. Okay, let's not get scared by this saying you cannot undo the police. Who's going to take care of you guys robbing this and that? This isn't, you know, their thinking is so caught in that old trap. We need to get out of the box, get into another box, and start thinking straight. Okay, that's what leadership is all about. We need to figure out, okay, we need healthcare, we need psychological issues, we need this, we need that, we need that. 911 should not have a link to the police. Somebody should, if there's a need for help, that doesn't mean you send the damn police, excuse me. You know, before they get there, before you know, did you look at me like with a little disrespect? You dead. You know, what is that? You know, human beings have too many frailties to be able to carry lethal force at every angle of a disagreement. That cannot be tolerated. Cannot be tolerated. Okay, lethal force should not. You know, if a bear comes to the community, and I was telling my kids this the other day, a vicious bear, right, threatening a tree and coming this and that. Do they come and shoot the bear? No, they figure out, they're like 10 hours figuring out how they're going to get the bear down from the tree. You know, maybe like they might give him a gentle tranquilizer, carry him, wrap him in a little blankie, and take him and let him off and continue his life. But Eric Garner, he had a cigarette in his hand trying to make a buck, and you're going to squeeze his life out? You know, what the heck? We need to change this now. I won't say another word, Musa, and I promise to behave myself after that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, one thing that you said was we need visionaries. Oh, am I? I'm
Right.
on. Yeah, we need visionaries to come and help with this solution, and I agree with
Exactly.
that 100%. Like, it's definitely an old system that we're stuck in, and it kind of seems like that's the United States, right? It's just the old system. Like, we need changes at a constitutional level, not like, okay, let's kind of like change this law around a little bit and stuff like that. But I don't know, like back in the 70s when the riots were happening and everybody was like, okay, we're all together, we're breathing together, we all want the same thing. And what happens after that? Like, one of the things that I'm kind of concerned about is right now, yes, we're all on the same page. We know that we need massive change, not just, you know, a couple of laws here change to, you know, we don't want real civil rights. We want equality, right? We want to be on the same level as everyone else in this country, right? We don't want people to be able to come into our communities, the police come into our communities, treat us however we want to be treated because they feel that we're powerless and nothing's going to happen. I feel like one of the reasons that the police officer felt that he can do something like that is because he felt he could probably get away with it, right? So, I mean, how do we eradicate that type of thinking? Do we I believe we have to blow up the whole thing, right? And just retrain and have some type of new system to work that works better for us. So, well, first of all, I want to say that whoever has a question for Ellora or for my dad, please, there's a raise hand icon somewhere in the participant screen. I encourage you to ask some questions because I want dialogue. And one of the things that I know, I remember back in 2014 when I'm in the DC metro area, and one of the protests and riots that was close to me was Freddie Gray, right? I'm not sure if you guys remember. I'm sure you remember actually. He was arrested and he died in police custody. And that was sort of like the breaking point for me, even though there were a lot of things leading up to Freddie Gray, like you mentioned, Eric Garner, there was Mike Brown, there's Trayvon Martin, stuff like that. It kind of felt like a similar type of environment where you have a cluster of these killings by police, right? Just like how we have now Breonna Taylor, we have not Freddie Gray, George Floyd, and a lot of others. So, and then it just kind of blew up, right? The situation blew up. At that time, I was able to kind of I think it might have been the first time in my life that I kind of looked inside and asked, what can I do to help? Like individually, like not, going out with everybody protesting and saying this is not right, holding up my Black Lives Matter sign, but what can I do, right? And then it kind of started like a soul searching type of thing. And I actually came out with things that I never thought that I would be able to do, right? Like that's when I started my publishing business, right? And I started coming out with books about the Haitian Revolution and teaching young kids that, hey, we've been in oppressed situations before, and we all came together and we were able to beat our oppressors and have that victory. So there is a precedent for us coming together and fighting against things that are right. Obviously, we probably can't have another Haitian revolution the way that, Dessalines and Toussaint.
We need one.
And all those guys. Yeah,
we need one.
We need one. It's probably going to look different than the one that happened in 1804. But unless all of us kind of go inside and start asking ourselves those questions, it's going to be very difficult to come up with that solution of how we're going to be able to win. So I encourage everybody to go inside and ask yourselves those difficult questions of what can I do personally to affect change, right? We all of us are not going to be on the front lines. All of us are not going to be, doing something, on the sidelines and stuff. We all have a part to play in our freedom. Right, so I encourage everybody to go inside and ask themselves, and then you'll be surprised, right? In fact, Pop, you're the one that kind of showed me the benefits of meditating, right? I've seen
That's right.
On a number of occasions, just sitting down and asking yourself those, and just have complete silence, and you'll be surprised at what the answers that come to you.
Enough said. I've done my job, man. Exactly. Look at you two. I think I just want to say one thing, and I don't want to start any trouble, but I tell you, we're Haitians. Those of us that are Haitians, that I don't know why I love Haiti so much. This is where I was born, and I left at the age of 10, and it doesn't matter when I left. I love the place, but when I went back there recently, it was kind of like a scary experience. There's so many people and everything seems lost, and there's so much garbage everywhere. So it doesn't seem like everybody cares about where they are, and that, of course, it's not true. It's that the situation is so dense. There's this tremendous boot on every Haitian's neck, knee and boot, to keep you from being able to reach your potential. I think as a Haitian, one of the things I decided in my little world, I know I can't change everything for Haiti, but every single person that I encounter, I will treat as an equal, and everyone should have the right opportunity and try not to take advantage of people, and the government, you know, we probably as Haitians need to understand when to keep quiet, so that we don't get in trouble with the US boycotting us because we said, everybody should be free. And then, or yeah, these guys have a good system, whatever. We need to keep quiet and focus on and the fact that we need to improve. And the improvement comes to every Haitian needs to respect every other Haitian, and we need to focus on each family and the right for workers, the right to have a clean place to live, a house to live in. Nobody should be worried about food, where to live, healthcare. You know, before I die, I want to do something about healthcare, living, food, security, children education. Those four areas for us, and then take all that garbage out of Port-au-Prince and stuff. We need to find some other place to put it. I, I'm not gonna say what I was gonna say.
Yeah.
I could just get in trouble. Anyway,
Yeah,
I want us to look beyond. We need to have a new way of thinking about Haiti, where everybody has an opportunity. We skip all the other stuff. Let's get to the computer age and get develop some Mark Zuckerbergs and stuff. Haitian Mark Zuckerbergs.
absolutely. Well, I know,
All right.
part of your history was, a community organizer in Brooklyn where you worked tirelessly to
Yeah.
fulfill a lot of those opportunities for Haitians coming into, new Haitian immigrants coming into
Yes.
the U.S. So
It
I know
was.
you've been
It was.
working on that, and I know we have
Yeah.
other projects coming up
Yes.
that's going to be working towards that. So I'm excited about that. But I know we're running out of
All right.
time a little bit, but I had a couple of questions that were emailed to me. So I want to kind of start off the questions from the participants with
Okay.
the questions, and then we'll probably go ahead and wrap up. So, but first question for Ellora, right? So from the US to Haiti and pretty much anywhere in the world, there's always discussions about income inequality. What do you predict could happen if income inequality isn't addressed in a productive way?
I think we're seeing it. I think this is what we're experiencing right now. When we got, when the COVID-19 pandemic hit, it exposed the inequality in our society in every aspect. So in particular for Black people in the US, they don't have jobs where they can work from home for the most part, less than a fifth. So less than 20% can work from home. They're more likely to be employed in the essential industries. So Black people are more likely to work in services, grocery store jobs, public service work. That stuff is still going on. We have a higher propensity for health conditions that are comorbidities that can cause, worse experience of COVID-19 symptoms. Black children have higher rates of asthma because they grow up in more polluted neighborhoods. So it's like you start to list all of the dimensions. The racial wealth gap is like, Black people have 1/10 the wealth of white people. We're at a point where people can't work and you have nothing to fall back on. So, if I could have imagined what that catastrophe would look like that we were barreling towards, it's kind of what's going on right now. We have, someone said, it's the 1918 flu pandemic plus the 1929 depression plus 1968, where social unrest is just, letting loose. That's where we are. So I think we're there, and we only have one way to go, and we have to make the right policies and choices to get to that better future.
Can I want to add one thing. I think that's wonderful. One thing to add, everything you said was fantastic. As we finish, I want to add that over the last 10 15 years. I visited like 120 countries around the world and have been zillions of cities and seen talks to all sorts of people, etc. And I always look at with a journalist eye with every interaction, every culture, 120 countries. I can tell you, we are living in the best country without any question. We need to fight for our right in this country. There's no better place where we can lay down and just struggle and fight for it. This is it. You know, we're in the right place. We have the right opportunity. Yes, we have a lot of work to do, but we need to keep doing it. There's no other place to go. This is, it's a great country. We're going to fight for it. We're going to make it better. And it allows us to demonstrate and fight, etc., to change things. And we've done it many times. This is the last thing I wanted to bring up. But anyway, thanks everybody for.
All right. So I have actually have a question for you too, Pop. And thanks for that answer, Ellora. That was great. Okay. For Dr. Frantz, immigrants usually bring their language, culture, etc. to a new place. However, there are some things they leave behind, and sometimes they consciously make a choice to leave some things behind. What did you choose to leave behind in Haiti?
Well, I came to the U.S. at the age of 10, so I had like no choices for a long time. You know, I was just like a kid, and I was happy to be fed, nurtured, and have a place, etc. But as I recall, my what I left in Haiti was the innocence of being in a society where we're all the same, we're all presumed loved and felt to be equal, and this and that. I wasn't old enough to discern the subtleties of how Haitians are treated in Haiti. You know, I was just happy to be Haitian and see, I'm in a society where 95% of people are Black, and I'm happy, and I'm a normal kid. You know, so I think leaving that, coming to the U.S., all of a sudden, I'm in a school where like they're like 5 Black kids, and I'm treated kind of different, and etc. So I had to give up that sense of security, etc. And it was a struggle to define how I fit in this situation. So I left that whole, innocence behind in terms of being in a secure, homogeneous kind of place, and had to adapt to the U.S.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the immigrant condition, right? It's like, okay,
That's the immigrant condition.
Security. Yes. You're like, all right, it's sink or swim, right? Fight or flight.
Right.
So, absolutely. Okay, there's a question
no
for
choice.
me. There's a question for me here as well. Okay, what is your perspective of artists during times like this? How can artists be agents of change, right? So I guess I'll put on my artist cap for this one, right? It's funny to even be considered as an artist, but I guess, with writing down things that people enjoy, I take that, artist tag. I think during these times, artists become very inspired and very busy. I could even talk about myself. I've been writing nonstop for a lot of, for probably like the past 2 weeks. And not necessarily about what's going on, but it's sort of like my way of addressing or dealing with what's going on. Obviously the things that I write about are mostly about our history, Haitian Revolution, our heroes, our sheroes, the people, our ancestors who led us to freedom. And I think one of the reasons I like to, especially in times like this, why I get inspired to write about those things, because I really truly feel that there are lessons to be learned from that part of our history that we can use today, right? The leaders that that showed, our ancestors that showed that tremendous leadership and overbearing, situations where I'm pretty sure they were confident, but I'm pretty sure that they had doubts. I'm pretty sure they weren't sure if this decision was the right decision to make. So with our people in that fight and them actually bringing that fight to an end victoriously, I mean, I can't really find another story like that in the world history. So I tend to concentrate on those, on that part of our history and just write continuously for hours on end, because I know that there's something in there that we can use today, right? So that's what inspires me. Like, I think I'm still searching for clues. I'm searching for answer for things that we did back then that we can use today to get us ourselves out of that situation. So I'm tremendously inspired, especially just to put something like this together. Like, I just want to keep the brain working, keep moving forward so that we could find those solutions, because I think the solution lies in all of us, right? I truly believe that. And the more that we talk about it, the more that we take action, the more that we hone our craft, then the answer is going to come to us, and we're going to be able to put it into action, and we're going to be able to foster serious change. How can artists be agents of change? We just have to do our work, right? I'm a firm believer that it's not me that's writing out all these stories. I feel like the ancestors are coming to me and telling me what they want me to write about them, right? Like, of course, I do a lot of research. I read a lot of books. I mean, I could stay up and just read all night for months. And but when I start to write, it's my ancestors taking over me and telling their stories through me, right? So all we have to do is work. We just have to work. We have to put our paintbrushes to canvas. We have to put our pencils to paper, or whatever form of artistry you have, and just let the ancestors flow through you and create whatever it is that you are here to create. And then we'll be able to make that change. So that's my answer to the question. So, all right, so we're at 2:13. We're coming towards the end. So if anybody has a question for the panel, just go ahead and unmute, and then you could ask your question. Or if you have a comment or whatever you would like to add, we'll be happy to get any questions answered to the best of our ability. So if there's anyone there who would like to ask.
Frantz.
Yes, Debbie Couliard. All right, so let me introduce Debbie Couliard first. I mentioned I went to school in California for a number of years. I believe I went to school there for about 3 years. And Ms. Couliard was one of my teachers, right? So one of my favorite teachers at that. So I'm happy that you're here. How you doing, Ms. Couliard?
I am doing quite well. It's also an absolute thrill to see both Ellora and your dad. I haven't seen your dad since 1997 when we went on a field trip to the East Coast. Great to see you, Dr. Derenoncourt. I think of you often.
Oh.
I won't tell, I promise. So I feel like I'm in a bit of a predicament because of the fact that, well, first of all, I'm not eligible to vote in this country because I happen to be an immigrant also, who never I never took American citizenship or whatever. I guess my issue is I don't know what to do. My feeling is that, okay, so my first thought is once they start nailing these cops, justifiably nailing these cops for what they're doing is going to be a step in the right direction. So I guess I'm not sure I'm not sure what to do from my perspective. What can I do? I've got one more year of teaching to go, and I'm teaching actually on a Marine base in Southern California now in the public sector. I don't know what to do.
Yeah. Well, I would say this, like I mentioned it a couple of times, it's a very difficult situation for everyone. But if you have a grasp, if you have an idea of what's going on in this world, there's nothing anybody could really, no one could really tell you what to do. You know what I mean? Like, I'm a firm believer in all the answers to the questions that you may have lie within you, right? So I mentioned a few times that, you know, like meditating, right? And just asking yourself, how can I contribute to what's happening in the world today, right? And I believe if you do sit in a quiet place, 15 minutes, complete silence, and you ask yourself this question, then the answer will come, right? And don't give up too quickly if it doesn't come, right? It may lead you, because questions usually come, when you get an answer, it usually comes, another question comes right after that, right? I mean, you can ask yourself questions for months and months and months, but it's leading you to the answer, right? So I believe, like, because you have to do, in order to really have an effect, then it has to come within you, right? It has the solution, the answer has to come from within in order for it to be very effective. If someone is like, okay, Ms. Couliard, here's what I need you to do. I need you to, you know, write a Black Lives Matter poster, go out on the front lines in LA and walk around for 2 hours. I mean, you could go and do that, but it may not be what your contribution is meant to be. It has to come from my perspective, from what I believe is those answers must come from within. And when that answer does come, then don't adhere to it, right? Don't move away from it because you feel like, man, you know, that's not part of my character. That's not what I do, right? But if that's what's coming from within, then that's what you need to do, right? That's part of the freedom that we have as people, to express ourselves in any way that we choose. So that would be my answer to your question.
Can I add? And I think that, you know, there are a lot of people that are asking themselves, okay, we're all discussing what the heck do we do about this? Well, I think, you know, a couple of things. One, we need to start by redefining the parameters that we live in. I mean, you know, the thing that the COVID-19 has helped us to clarify, to understand that our situation is different from the situation of people that live in another area. And so we need to be able to look at the situation, and you need to change the concept. Like, for example, in terms of police, you know, our concept of policing is, you know, if I have a problem, I call the police, they come and they help me and this and that. And yes, that's fine. But in every other area, it's not the same. So we need to accept the fact that there are some institutions that are so bent on self-preservation that they can change. We're going to at some point have to stop the police department. Hello?
Yeah.
Stop the police department from perpetuating things that they don't even understand what they're doing. You know, I mean, so we need to just a new system, and it's not all just telling people, you know, you're terrible, you're this and that. It's just that you can't set somebody with train them to be a killing machine and send them to talk to some lady crossing the street and helping them, and they get mad and then they whack her because she didn't do what they said. You know, so we have to accept the fact that we have to get out of the box, change our thinking altogether, and accept the fact that what we're going to do, we have to change the system to properly serve the community that is serving. And it's not something against the institution as a whole. In this particular department, corner of the world, it cannot function that way. So anyway, that's the way I see it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Would you like to add anything, Laura, to that? Okay, great. All right. So, any other questions? We're getting ready to wrap up soon. Any other questions from the participants? Going once, going twice, 3 times. All right. So what I'll do is I will let everybody give us some closing words, some words in closing, and to the panelists, my dad and Ellora, and then we'll go ahead and we'll wrap things up. So Ellora, is there anything you would like to say in closing? Where can we follow your work? I know you're working on a lot of interesting things right now. So for the people that are here that would like to know a little bit more about your work and what you're doing, how could they do that?
Yeah, I dropped a link to my website in the chat box. You can also find me on Twitter at Derenoncourt. And so give me a follow. I tweet about my work and related work in economics. Next up, I'm working on the racial wealth gap from 1850 to today. So, you know, even pre-emancipation to the present. And, you know, it's looking like Reconstruction was our chance, and we didn't get what we were supposed to get then. So that's an ongoing struggle, and I hope it can shed light on the conversation around reparations in this country.
Awesome. All right, thank you. You'll always be my kid sister, so I appreciate your work. I appreciate everything that you're doing. So proud to have you as a sister, and continue all the great work that you've been doing.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, indeed. All right, Pops. Man, you have, we didn't even touch on a number of things that you used to do in your life, you know, in regards to your activism, your community organizing in the Haitian community. And one of the things I do appreciate with you is that you don't shy away from these difficult issues. I'm happy that you were able to come and share your point of view with a number of people that I invited. And so do you have any closing comments, any words for us to think about as we sign off from this webinar? You're muted. Hello, you're on mute.
There we go.
Okay.
I muted myself. It's probably a very helpful thing. I wanted to just add, I know this is an aside, I've talked a lot of stuff already, just to remind people and family members and those that are watching, with the COVID-19 situation, as a doctor, I'm just going to give a little free advice. How to keep us safe, you know? Because I know we're going to have time to talk about all my revolutionary activities in the past, but keep you guys safe. Remember, protect your personal space. What do I mean by that? I mean, I as a physician, I've lived through all sorts of issues, tuberculosis, hepatitis, and HIV, and all of these stuff. And how do I, and the flu every year coming by, how do we keep ourselves safe from COVID-19? It's basically, imagine this. It's as if you're in an imaginary bubble. That's your space. when you choose to let somebody in your space, if they touch your body, they're invading your space. If they come within close enough where you can feel their breath, and if let's say 6 feet, at the minimum. But obviously that's not always practical. But just remember, until we have some protection against this thing, and it's very serious, protect your personal space, wash your hands, be very clean about everything. Understand that if you don't let people in your space, you could protect, wear masks, gloves if you have to, wash your hands, and be just extra cautious, everybody, please. That was my final thing, just to make sure that we protect your personal space and be safe.
All right, awesome. Thank you, Pops. Appreciate you for joining us this afternoon or this morning. You're in West Coast time. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. So we appreciate everybody joining us this afternoon. I really enjoyed this talk. I've seen Ellora's presentation before, and it was definitely eye-opening. And, if you really think about it, I mean, that's the results of all that was happening during, the increase of policing of Black people. I mean, it's brought us to where we are today. And the question is, how much longer can we deal with that until we demand change? So all of us have a part to play. Ask yourself those difficult questions, search for those answers from within, and let's put it into action, right? So it's all gonna look different for everybody, right? But you ask yourself those questions, you keep asking, what can I do? What can I do? And it's gonna come to you. It might come to you in the shower. Usually my answers come to me in the shower. It comes to you in the middle of the night. But the key is, to understand that your solution is everyone's solution, right? What you feel, that how you can contribute affects not just you and your family, it affects all of us. And we desperately need it today. So thank you, everybody. Appreciate you for logging on. Thank you, Ellora. Thank you, Pops. Thank you, everybody that came on. Have a great rest of the day. Have a great rest of the week. And I'll see a lot of y'all on Thursday. We're doing Baina and Friends on Thursday afternoon, as always. And take care. All right.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Ellora. Bye, Moose.
All right, Pop. See you later.
It was a wonderful presentation. Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I didn't get a chance to go through the
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, guys. All right, I'm gonna end. Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.